Meet Wayne Ritchie, former Marine, former Alcatraz prison guard, a federal deputy U.S. Marshal in San Francisco, a man who spent his entire life not only abiding by the law, but building a career around enforcing it. But one Christmas party in 1957 changed everything. He walked into a bar, a place everyone knew him, the bartenders, the customers. He wasn't a desperate stranger walking in off the street. He was a man people trusted until he reached into his jacket, pulled out a gun, and ordered everyone hand over their money. He wasn't in financial trouble. He wasn't a criminal. He was the man people called when criminals needed to be stopped, and in a matter of moments, the man trained to enforce the law had become everything he spent his life fighting against. By the time he came back to his senses, his career was over. His reputation was destroyed, and he was left with the question that would haunt him for decades. What in the hell happened? Wayne Ritchie wasn't the only person asking questions. Over the following decades, rumors began surfacing about a series of government experiments that should have never existed. Experiments involving drugs, manipulation, sex, deception, and the people who had absolutely no idea they were being used. All of it connected to a government program searching for something terrifying: mind control. At the center of it all was a man named George Hunter White, former federal narcotics agent, undercover specialist, a man who had spent his entire career learning how to lie, deceive, and infiltrate criminal worlds. He was perfect. His new employer was the CIA. He wasn't someone concerned with ethics. He was a man who understood how to manipulate people, how to gain their trust, how to exploit their weaknesses. And that is exactly why he was chosen. His new job wasn't to protect the public, not to bring criminals to justice, but to secretly experiment on ordinary people, men who had no idea they were being used as lab rats. This was Operation Midnight Climax, a secret branch of the CIA's MKUltra program, an operation designed around a horrifying question: how much control could you have over another human being? Could you make them reveal secrets? Could you manipulate their decisions? Could you push a person to act against their own morals, against their own survival even? The CIA wanted to find out, and they were willing to destroy innocent people to get their answer. White set up apartments in San Francisco designed to look like ordinary homes, but they weren't ordinary homes. They were traps. He hired prostitutes to go into bars, find men, gain their trust, and bring them back. The men thought they had gotten lucky. They had no idea they had just walked into a government experiment. Their drinks were laced with LSD. And behind two-way mirrors and false walls, CIA agents watched. Conversations were recorded. Behavior was documented. The women were instructed to keep the men talking, steer the conversation, and push them to see how far their actions could be influenced. The men had no idea they'd been drugged. No idea that they were being watched. They didn't know that every confused sentence, every paranoid thought, every moment of fear was being written down in a government report. To them, the reality was falling apart. The room was changing. Their thoughts no longer belonged to them. And the whole experiment was a secret. The men who were drugged didn't know. The public didn't know. Congress didn't know. The people responsible went home after their shifts and continued their careers as if nothing had happened. It wasn't until the 1970s, nearly 2 decades after Operation Midnight Climax began, that the truth started coming out. Investigations uncovered the CIA's secret experiments. The public finally learned about MKUltra, but as the agency began to face scrutiny, thousands of MKUltra documents were destroyed under orders from CIA leadership. Records disappeared. Names disappeared. Evidence disappeared. And with them, the possible of many victims ever knowing what had actually been done to them disappeared. The same people accused of running these experiments controlled the evidence that could expose them. The same people who committed these acts decided which records survived. Nobody went to prison. Nobody was charged. Many of the people who authorized these experiments retired and moved on with their lives. Meanwhile, the victims were left with questions that they could never fully answer. Then, in 1999, Wayne Ritchie found a clue. He picked up the newspaper and read an obituary of Sidney Gottlieb, the man who oversaw MKUltra. The article mentioned Christmas parties, spiked drinks, unsuspecting federal employees. Ritchie put the paper down. Then he picked it back up. For decades, people had told him there was no explanation, that he must have suffered some kind of a mental breakdown, that what happened that night was his burden to carry. And then, sitting there with the newspaper in his hand, he saw something that changed everything. For the first time in more than 40 years, he believed he had an answer. George Hunter White's own journal placed him at the exact same Christmas party on December 20th, 1957. The entry was Christmas party, Fed building, press room. The same George White who had spent years secretly dosing people with LSD. Ritchie sued the United States government. The court ruled that they couldn't prove what happened to him. He lost. The judge called it a troubling case. He said that if Ritchie was telling the truth, he had paid a terrible price in the name of national security. Then the case was dismissed. 40 years of searching, 40 years of questions, and in the end, no justice. The man who had spent his life enforcing the law was left trying to prove the government he served had secretly broken it. Governments have always sought power. Intelligence agencies have always looked for an advantage. The desire to understand, influence, and control human behavior had existed for as long as governments have existed, which leaves us with two important questions. The first, do you believe that decades of interest in controlling human behavior, influencing decisions, and breaking the limits of the human mind simply disappeared overnight? And the second question, what experiments are we going to learn about 50 years from now?